Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Paul, and in this RickGaming.com video, we're going to be taking a first look at MSI's X-Power Gaming Titanium for, of course, the X370 platform. This video is meant for an overview of the board, the feature set, as well as a preview of the performance, because we have an awful lot more testing to do over the next couple of days. But I did want to get this video up because a number of you have been messaging me or commenting on YouTube or Facebook asking, hey, what do I think of the board so far? Because I've not made it exactly secret that I'm testing it. And the answer is it's extremely positive. Now, we are testing it with a Ryzen 1700. And we've actually managed to overclock it with the stock Wraith cooler to a rather impressive 3.8 GHz, and that's really not trying. I've not really put too much effort into overclocking thus far. Now, just for your information, BIOS revisions are still incredibly important, and I released another video just yesterday showing this board with the latest BIOS up against an older BIOS with an Asus board. Now, this is not criticism of Asus board, the X370 Prime. It's simply that that BIOS was older, and you can quite clearly see the difference. I mean, for example, in a couple of benchmarks, the Ryzen 1700 at stock, might I add, actually beats the 1700X. And yes, it does have a slight memory clock advantage, 2400 for the Asus board versus 2667 for this board, but that's not enough to explain some of the disparity. For example, in Batman, you're looking at almost at 30 FPS difference. So, in other words, BIOS revision does matter. Regardless, this board, of course, is aimed at the enthusiast market. And, well, looking at the feature set, you can quite clearly see why. It is an absolute monster. And it features everything from 6 SATA ports, an M.2 port, all of the USB headers that you would expect, and robust overclocking support. But we'll get into that in the video itself. With all of that said, hopefully you are going to enjoy the video. So let's get started. Taking a quick look over the board's features, and MSI are keen in marketing literature to point out the Titanium's high quality construction. They've been particularly attentive of the M2 at PCIe and DDR4 memory slots, reinforcing them with steel armour to ensure they don't bend out of shape and also reduces interference. While interference isn't typically a problem, the armour's effect to prevent the slots from bending or twisting is certainly appreciated, especially if, like us, you're regularly working on the rig and switching out components. The board also comes with a plethora of SATA cables, labels, a generous LED header, and motherboard manual, and of course an overview of the board. In terms of aesthetics, the board, at least to my eyes, looks gorgeous and one of the nicest X370 boards out there. Thanks to Ryzen having most of the components on chip, motherboard manufacturers are free to have a more blank canvas, and it works well. The steel armour on the various slots is matched rather well with the silver and white PCB and I/O shields, with the occasional black slot or component here or there to add a nice contrast. It also reflects lighting rather beautifully. Rear I/O ports are plentiful and include USB 2, 3.1 Lightning ports, BIOS flashback, which comes in handy in oh crap moments, the usual HD audio ports, which are supported by Nahimic, a clear CMOS button at the rear, talking of oh crap moments, and a gigabit LAN port. Internal connections include 2 PCIe 3.0 slots, a 1 PCIe 2.0 slot for Crossfire or Extreme SLI, 6 SATA ports, 2 M2 ports, and a rather impressive assortment of headers for fans and water cooling setups, along with debug LEDs, along with a few other bits and pieces. You might also spot the additional 4-pin CPU power connector on the board, which goes along with the traditional 8-pin. You don't need to plug this in, but doing so allows more power delivery to the CPU and more stable voltage. If you're planning on doing more extreme overclocking, then you might want to consider this. But if you're just using a low-end AIO or even just a fan setup, this is probably something you don't need to concern yourself with too much and buy a power supply specifically for this purpose. We also decided to throw in a few benchmarks of MSI's X370X Power Gaming Titanium, though there will be more in the full review, and the CPU running at stock, that is, auto-selected in BIOS with no overclocking thrown in, and a manual 3.8 overclock, all running on a GTX 1080. Performance was, well, awesome. As you would expect, multi-threaded applications such as encoding and so on are crushed by this processor, and absolutely decimates processors with lower numbers of cores. Ryzen's gaming performance is improving rather quickly, and recent BIOS releases from multiple vendors have improved performance noticeably. We released a video on getting the most out of your Ryzen CPU, so do check that out in the video description for more information. Well, we hope you've enjoyed the early impressions so far of this board. Now, I know that I'm being a little slower with my Ryzen coverage, but quite frankly, there is a lot of information out there to digest. And I didn't just want to put up a Ryzen review pretty early and then just kind of regret it because BIOS revisions, and it was pretty bloody obvious to me that BIOS software and a few other bits and pieces were really, well, kind of hampering the performance. For example, I tackled another video yesterday that was regarding Ashes of Singularity, where escalation has received about 30% boost using the latest patch on Ryzen CPUs because the developers have optimized the engine. Now, of course, they did put about 400 man-hours into that total, which is to say it's an awful lot of work on the behalf of developers, but this is obviously as AMD continue to improve the BIOS, as they continue to release better support for their processors, as of course we see better chipset drivers, and naturally developers start to incorporate that into engines. For example, Bethesda are already pledging that they're going to very much optimize for AMD architectures, which of course includes not only Vega, but also, well, the X370s. So, yeah, I'm very impressed with this board, I must say. It looks gorgeous. I mean, that's my opinion, of course. Aesthetics are on the eye of the beholder, but I personally believe this board looks absolutely beautiful. As for the Ryzen 7 1700, it could possibly be about the best value processor out there at the moment in terms of the Ryzen lineup. Arguably, some of the Ryzen 5s are very impressive indeed, especially given their price point. However, if you do need 8 cores, 16 threads, I don't really feel that you can do much better in terms of a value proposition than the 1700, especially because they overclock pretty well. You know, around the 4 GHz mark, most Ryzen seem quite comfortable hitting, and that is, of course, unless you're using some very exotic form of cooling. But I'm somewhat getting off topic now, and, you know, it's not really in the remit of this video. But I do thank you very much for watching. Hopefully you're enjoying this new format. It seemed to get a pretty positive reception yesterday. I do grant you I still need to do an awful lot in regards to lighting and a few other bits and pieces. It's still pretty early, and quite frankly, I am still getting used to being in front of a camera, although I have been in front of a camera a couple of times before. For example, you can type in DirectX 12 Simplified and you can see another one of me, and I also believe I was there for a couple of other graphics cards reviews. But, you know, for a while I haven't been in front of the camera, and it's just simply because, well, I've just been moving and stuff. It's just not really been practical. But now I am. So, yeah, there are definitely still things that I will be improving. I'm still trying to get used to the focus of the camera, figuring out the right angles. Audio is another thing. Hopefully this video has slightly better audio. I'm trying my microphone at a slightly different position. And, well, yeah, a bunch of crap. That's the technical term. Anywho, I think that's just about it for this video. Hopefully you have found it somewhat informative, my friends. Don't forget the normal thing, you know, share, subscribe, like, and do hit me up on social media. I suck at the moment on Twitter just because I don't have enough time. I'm really sorry for anyone who's messaging me on Twitter. I am not, you know, ignoring it. I just haven't really checked it, and I don't have my account set up. It's a long story. So do Facebook message me if you want, or, you know, email me. You can find my email address at contact@redgamingtech.com. With all of that said, bye.